ज्ञानाञ्जनतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hare Krishna. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, the seventh canto, fourth chapter, and today's text is text 37. So I'll read the text a couple of times, and then the devotees can also chant. न्यस्तक्रीडनको बालो जडवत्तन्मनस्तया कृष्णग्रहगृहीतात्मा न वेद जगदीदृशम्। न्यस्तक्रीडनको बालो जडवत्तन्मनस्तया कृष्णग्रहगृहीतात्मा न वेद जगदीदृशम्। न्यस्तक्रीडनको बालो जडवत्तन्मनस्तया कृष्णग्रहगृहीतात्मा न वेद जगदीदृशम्. The devotees can chant.
Nyastakridanako balo jaravatan manastaya Krishna graha grahitatma naveda jagat idrisham.
Nyastakridanako. Go ahead, Gary Krishna.
No, go ahead, Prabhu.
Nyastakridanaka balo jadavatan manastaya Krishna graha grihitatma naveda jagad idrisham.
Nyastakridanako balo jadavatanmanastaya Krishna graha grihitatma naveda jagat idrisham.
Any other Prabhus who'd like to chant? I'll read the word for word meaning. Nyasta, having given up. Kridanako or Kridanakaha, all sporting activities or tendencies for childhood play. Bala, a boy. Jadavat, as if dull without activities. Tat manastaya, being fully absorbed in Krishna. Tat manastaya literally means mindfully absorbed in that, but that in this context means Krishna. So that's how Srila Prabhupada says, being fully absorbed in Krishna. Krishna Graha, by Krishna, who's like a strong influence, like a Graha or planetary influence. Grit Atma, whose mind is fully attracted. Na, not. Veda, understood. Jagat, the entire material world. Idrisham, like this. A translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. From the very beginning of his childhood, Prahlad Maharaj was uninterested in childish playthings. Indeed, he gave them up altogether and remained silent and dull, being fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Since his mind was always affected by Krishna consciousness, he could not understand how the world goes on, being fully absorbed in the activities of sense gratification. And purport by Srila Prabhupada. Prahlad Maharaj is a vivid example of a great person fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. In Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela 8:274, it is said, Sthavara Jangama dekhe, na dekhe tara murti, sarvatra haya nija ishtadeva spurti. A fully Krishna conscious person, although situated in this material world, does not see anything but Krishna anywhere and everywhere. This is a sign of a Mahabhagavata. The Mahabhagavata sees Krishna everywhere because of his attitude of pure love for Krishna, as is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita 5.38. Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadeva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by devotees whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Shama Sundara, situated within the heart of the devotee. An exalted devotee or Mahatma, who is rarely to be seen, remain fully conscious of Krishna and constantly see the Lord within the core of his heart. It is sometimes said that one is influenced by evil stars like Saturn or Shani, Rahu or Ketu. He cannot make an advancement in any prospective activity. Just the opposite way, Prahlad Maharaj is influenced by Krishna, the supreme planet, and thus could not think of the material world and live without Krishna consciousness. That is a sign of a Mahabhagavata. Even if one is an enemy of Krishna, a Mahabhagavata sees him and also to be also engaged in Krishna's service. Another crude example is that everything appears yellow to the jaundiced eye. Similarly to a Mahabhagavata, everyone but himself appears to be engaged in Krishna's service. Prahlad Maharaj is the approved Mahabhagavata, the supreme devotee. In the previous verse, it was stated that he had natural attachment, Naisargiki Rati. The symptoms of such natural attachment to Krishna are described in this verse. Although Prahlad Maharaj was only a boy, he had no interest in playing, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:242. Vairaktir anyatra cha. A perfect symptom of a perfect Krishna conscious is that one loses interest in all material activities. For a small boy to give up playing is impossible. But Prahlad Maharaj, being situated in first-class devotional service, was always absorbed in a trance of Krishna consciousness. Just as a materialistic person is always absorbed in thoughts of material gain, a Mahabhagavata like Prahlad Maharaj is always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. So I'll read the translation again, just for context. From the very beginning of his childhood, Prahlad Maharaj was uninterested in childish playthings. Indeed, he gave them up altogether and remained silent and dull, being fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Since his mind was always affected by Krishna consciousness, he could not understand how the world goes on, being fully absorbed in the activities of Krishna, of sense gratification. Hare Krishna. And very happy to have the opportunity to share a few points on this verse. This section of the Srimad Bhagavatam is very wonderful because it describes the qualities of Prahlad Maharaj. The pastimes of Lord Nrsingadev are not new in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken 5,000 years ago. The pastimes of Lord Nrsingadev are documented in much older Puranas and in much more detail. So the oldest Purana is the Padma Purana. The Padma Purana has a lot of details of the appearance of Lord Nrsimhadev and a lot of glorification of Lord Nrsimhadev and great details of his activities when he appeared from the pillar and so on. Similarly, the Narsingha Puran also has great amount of detail about this pastime of Lord Nrsimhadev. So it's not that the pastime of Lord Nrsimhadev was narrated for the first time in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's an already well-known pastime that existed in the ancient Puranas, way more ancient than Srimad Bhagavatam. But what is unique about Srimad Bhagavatam is that Srimad Bhagavatam actually doesn't focus so much on Lord Nrsimhadev, except at the time when Lord Nrsimhadev actually appears from the pillar, and then there are a few verses about how he fights and kills the demons, and finally Hiranyakashipu, and then the prayers by the demigods to Lord Nrsimhadev. That's basically it. But the bulk of the seventh canto really focuses on the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj, his character, his activities, his interaction with Hiranyakashipu, how he was tortured, and then how he interacted with his teachers, how he interacted with his fellow classmates, how he taught them, what they asked him. So there are chapters and chapters in the seventh canto you'll read, which are really focused on the character, the nature, the pastimes, and the mentality, the Krishna conscious position of Prahlad Maharaj, Srila Prahlad Maharaj. And so that is a unique twist in Srimad Bhagavatam, but Srimad Bhagavatam really focuses on the whole pastime from the perspective of Srila Prahlad Maharaj. And that is the trend in Srimad Bhagavatam. If you see right from all the pastimes of Prithu Maharaj, the pastimes of Jada Bharat, the pastimes of Vritrasur, glorification of Vritrasur, glorification of Kardam Muni, and all of those pastimes, right from the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, glorification of Narada Muni. The emphasis is the glorification of the devotees of the Lord. And emphasizing the characteristics, the character of the devotees of the Lord. There's a very interesting point in this verse, very interesting metaphor that's used, very poetic and very beautiful. And the phrase that's used is Krishna Graha Grihitatma. So in Vedic astrology, and again, I'm not a Vedic astrologist, but whatever I know a little bit, the activities of materialistic people, they're very interested in understanding what specific planets are influencing their activity so that they can have some recourse to that. So depending upon what you're interested in doing. Sometimes some of the planets that are negative influence on our personality or our activities, like Shani or Saturn, they have an influence where things will not really go right for you. Even if you make the effort, things will not. If there's a 10% chance of something going wrong, that'll happen. There are other planets like Jupiter and Mangala in Vedic astrology. Jupiter, being a very large planet, has the influence of slowing things down for you. So if you're really keen on having something really quickly happen in your life, the heavy influence of Jupiter or Mangala will slow things down. These are all things in Vedic astrology. Of course, Srila Prabhupada never wanted us to focus so much on Vedic astrology and depend on Krishna. So the point of this conversation is not that we should understand Vedic astrology. The point is that the metaphor that's used here is that just like materialistic men are worried about the influence of these various grahas, literally graha means house. That's the Sanskrit meaning of the word graha. But in the context of planets, they're also called grahas or planets, right? So the various planets have various types of influences. And so the metaphor that's used here is that Prahlad Maharaj was heavily influenced by the Krishna planet. So the Krishna planet had such a vice-like grip on the mind and the intelligence and the general existence of Prahlad Maharaj that he could not think of anything other than Krishna. Everything that he thought, He basically embodied that verse from the Gita, Yat karoshi yat ashnasi, yat jihosi dadasi, yat tapassasi kaunteya, tat kurusha madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you give away, whatever austerities you perform, do it as an offering to me. So Srila Prahlad Maharaj embodied that mindset where there was nothing that he did or saw or spoke or ate or thought that was not Krishna conscious. And that was his position. And that's a beautiful metaphor that so we are influenced by so many things, right? And then something enters our head, and that becomes the overriding thought. And everything that we are doing, even when we're chanting around, we're constantly thinking about that. And so to get to a point where we only constantly thinking of Krishna, at least when we do our sadhana, is really the subtle message that we can get from this verse. Where how can we get to a point where we are Krishna Graha Grit Atma? How can we surrender ourselves to a point where the Krishna planet actually captures our consciousness? And this was the position of Prahlad Maharaj. And although he was a child, he was not interested in. The other point in the verse is that he was not interested in things that people of that age or are typically interested in. And so he was jadavat, or as if dull, without activities. And so it's very interesting because the phrase that's used is jadavat, means as if dull. If it was simply jada, then you would get the impression that Prahlad Maharaj was actually dull. And so he really had no. The reason he was quiet and not active was because he's actually dull. He's unable to or incapable of engaging in materialistic activities. But that was not the case. He was not incapable of engaging in material activities. He was not unable to. He was just not interested in. It was not something that was of importance to him. And in the fifth canto, you would have read also how Bharat Maharaj, after his lifetime as a deer, the next lifetime he was born in a Brahmana family. But then he remembered how he uh, was so attached to a deer towards the end of his life as the king. And as a result, he was born as a deer, and he still remembered his past life. And he stayed aloof as a deer as well. And then when he finally got the next birth, he was born in a Brahmana family, but then he remembered how he got attached. And so he decided willfully not to engage. So he essentially appeared to everyone else as deaf, dumb, and not very intelligent. And he would do the opposite of what he was supposed to do or told to do. And the general family just thought he was completely useless, not very intelligent. And so they left him alone. They maybe even criticized him, but they didn't consider him worthy of engaging in materialistic things. It's just didn't think him worthy. And so he maintained that position and he lived his life that way until he met Maharaj Raghugana. And then when he was chastised severely by Maharaj Raghugana, he revealed in a very subtle way that who are you chastising and who are you going to kill? Are you going to kill the body or the soul? Because the soul cannot be killed and the body is not alive anyway. So what are you actually killing? And Maharaj Raghugana was so astute that as soon as he heard that from Bharat, he immediately realized this is not just some foolish, dumb person. He is a great, highly realized soul. And so that's why the word Jadavat is very important, because it's not like Prahlad Maharaj was incapable of or unwilling to or incapable of engaging in materialistic activities. He was just unwilling to because it was not of interest to him. And the third point in the verse is about how he could not understand how the world goes by and goes on, being fully absorbed in materialistic activities and materialistic activities that are focused on sense gratification. And so if you look at a person, if you look at people who are not interested in spiritual life and they look at devotees, they are unable to understand how we can sit and spend 2 hours chanting the holy name, and they consider it an impossibility. When we talk to people in general and ask them to chant. And the biggest pushback, even if people who are favorable or not against spiritual life, the biggest pushback is time. Prabhu, I don't have the time to chant. And I cannot imagine taking 2 hours out of my day every day to chant Hare Krishna. I don't know how I can do that. My schedule is so tight. And so it's really impossible for devotees who are not dedicating their focus on spiritual activities. Even imagine how someone can chant 2 hours a day or read for an hour every day, because there are so many things that they are missing out on. And so that is the shift in consciousness that happens when you become attached to Krishna, that everything else becomes secondary and the focus on chanting the holy name becomes important. And then the one last point I'll make on this is that, and Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, Prahlad Maharaj is the approved Mahabhagavata supreme devotee. And in this previous verse, it was said he had natural attachment, naisargiki rati. The symptoms of such natural attachment for Krishna are described in this verse. So although he was a boy, he was fully Krishna conscious. And in the previous verses also, Srila Prabhupada quotes from the teachings of Kapiladev, where Kapiladev speaks about the qualities of a sadhu. Titikshava karunika, surada sarvadehinam, ajata shatrava shanta, sadhava sadhubhushana. And that verse describes the qualities of the sadhu, like Prahlad Maharaj. Titikshava, tolerant, karunika, merciful, surada sarvadehinam, friendly to all living entities, not just people who we like, but all living entities. That's a very key point, right? It's very easy for us to be friendly with people that we like, but to all living entities, challenge, right? Ajata Shatrava, no enemies. Doesn't consider anybody his enemy, nor does he have any enemies. Shanta, very peaceful. Sadhava. Sadhava means one who follows scripture. And Sadhubhushana. These are the qualities of the sadhu. The reason why this is important to understand the characteristic of Prahlad Maharaj is that for anything that we do, we have to develop personalities that we look up to. And so Srimad Bhagavatam is full of these descriptions of devotees, because we have to develop heroes that we look up to. If you look up to the wrong heroes, then you will develop wrong qualities. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is replete with all these pastimes of these devotees, and their characteristics, their personality is extolled in such a way that we can actually fix ourselves in the greatness of these devotees. If you look at the personality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the qualities, we can be attracted to the personality of Godhead, but we cannot emulate the qualities of the Lord, because the Supreme Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We cannot become the Lord. We cannot be like the Lord. We can only appreciate and love the Lord. But the devotees of the Lord, those are the qualities that we should try to emulate, not copy, not imitate, but emulate. So it's very important to understand what qualities these great devotees exhibit, so that we can then try to emulate them. I just wanted to read one section, and this is relevant here. It's in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and this comes in the conversation between Prithu Maharaj and Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu appears in the sacrificial arena of Prithu Maharaj. That's a very beautiful story. I'm not going to go into that story. The very beautiful, instructive lessons. But in the purport of one of the verses, actually, Canto 4, Chapter 20, Text 16, when the Lord Vishnu actually tells Prithu Maharaj that I'm very captivated by your excellent elevated qualities and excellent behavior, and thus I'm very favorably inclined towards you. Therefore, you may ask me for a benediction. So here the Lord tells Prithu Maharaj that he's very captivated by his elevated qualities. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport actually mentions the qualities, and this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita. There are 26 qualities of devotees great devotees that are mentioned. Srila Prabhupada mentions them in this purport. I'd like to read them So we can just get a little more elaboration of what all qualities the great devotees like Srila Prahlad Maharaj had. And so I'm reading from the middle of the purport where Srila Prabhupada says that when the spirit soul is contaminated by material modes of nature, one is considered good or bad with reference to material qualities. The one is transcendental to all material qualities, all good qualities come out. These qualities of a devotee, 26 in number, are listed as follows. Kind to everyone. Number 2, does not quarrel with anyone. 3, fixed in the absolute truth. 4, equal to everyone. 5, faultless. 6, charitable. 7, mild. 8, clean. 9, simple. 10, benevolent. 11, peaceful. 12, is completely attached to Krishna. 13, has no material hankering. 14, meek. 15, steady. 16, self-controlled. 17, does not eat more than required. 18, sane. 19, respectful. 20, humble. 21, grave. 22, compassionate. 23, friendly. 24, poetic. 25, expert. And 26, silent. Silent does not mean quiet, but silent when it comes to speaking nonsense. And Srila Prabhupada concludes this purport by saying, the Lord is satisfied by development of transcendental qualities of living entity and not by artificial performance of sacrifice and mystic yoga. In other words, unless one is fully qualified to become a pure devotee of the Lord, one cannot expect to be liberated from material entanglement. So when we say that we should become devotees of the Lord, it's important to understand what does that mean practically in terms of what qualities we should acquire, which is why I thought it was relevant to read some of these qualities. So back to the verse that we're reading, Prahlad Maharaj was so fixed in Krishna consciousness that he was uninterested in activities that are typical of children of his age, like playing. He remained silent and dull, being fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And since his mind was always affected by Krishna consciousness, essentially captured by the Krishna Graha Grihitatma, he was captured by the Krishna planet. You could actually not understand how the world goes on absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And this appears in another section of the same canto as well, when the teachers of Prahlad Maharaj ask him, what's the problem? Why don't you want to learn what we're teaching you? We're teaching you about how to be diplomatic, how to have, how to control your friends and how to control your enemies. We're teaching you all of these things. These are important for a prince to know because you're going to be the king in the future. You have to know these things. So what is your problem? Why don't you want to learn these things? And Prahlad Maharaj expresses his astonishment. He says, I've only heard of these concepts of friend and enemy. I never understood how they work because for me, everyone is part and parcel of the Lord. So how can somebody be your friend and another person be your enemy? I never actually grasped how this concept works. But now practically seeing how people are actually thinking of friend and enemy. So this whole idea of somebody can be a friend and somebody else can be your enemy was completely alien to Prahlad Maharaj. He was such a pure soul that he didn't even think, how can somebody be your enemy? So this whole concept is being expressed in this verse. So those are some of the points on this verse specifically. The Prabhu's, Mataji's, anybody would like to add anything to what I said, or if any questions or discussion, we can do that now.
Prabhu, I'd like to thank you for a very nice class. I have a kind of a question, I guess. I'm fascinated by the this one particular characteristic of Mahabhagavat, which Srila Prabhupada describes here, that he sees all others as engaged in devotional service, everyone but himself. Elsewhere, Srila Prabhupada has described this several places. He talks about this, the Mahabhagavat or Uttama Adhikari, that the vision of such a devotee is that they see everyone as engaged purely in devotional service except themselves. And it's not artificial. It's not that they try to see individuals in such a way. It's just that's their actual vision. That's what they see. But they are able to step down from the platform of an Uttama Adhikari to the platform of a Madhyama Adhikari, and they will do this voluntarily. At least in some cases, they choose to step down to the platform of a Madhyama Adhikari in order to be able to preach, because you can't preach to others when you see everyone as a superior. If everyone is engaged in devotional service but you, what do you have to contribute to them? Rather, you try to hear from them. But there are great souls who have this extraordinary vision, but they choose to come back to the Madhyama platform, a platform on which distinctions are made, and you see who is higher and lower, who is more advanced, who is in Maya, who is Krishna conscious, and then they will attempt to elevate everyone by preaching Krishna consciousness to them. Anyway, this subject matter is fascinating to me, and I'm curious to know if you can describe anything more about this.
Thank you, Prabhuji, Taraka Prabhuji. Thank you so much for your comments. And one thing I can think of is even in the regular dealings, we compare ourselves with those that we have access to. So let me give you elaboration on that. So if you are in a company of, in the material sense, company of people who are having no money, and one person has $10, then he may feel that he has $10 more than everybody else, and he feels that he's better off than everybody else, right? But when you start going in the company of people who have millions of dollars, then the $10 is insignificant. And then the millionaires compare each other, saying, well, I have only 10 and the other person has 20 million. When you're in the company of billionaires, then the person with 20 million also doesn't really have much money. So using the same analogy in terms of your focus on Krishna consciousness, a neophyte devotee might compare himself with others, saying, well, I'm doing so much service and I'm chanting, so I'm already very advanced. I've spent 4 years in Krishna consciousness, I'm already very advanced. But a Mahabhagavata devotee is really looking at what kind of service Hanuman did, what kind of service the other great devotees of the Lord are fully dedicating themselves to the service of the Lord. And then in comparison, the Mahabhagavata devotee feels that I really have done nothing. And so that is the mood that as you fix your mind more and more on Krishna consciousness and become more and more fixed in Krishna consciousness, you look at people that are doing more than you, and naturally you feel that you need to aspire to that. It's a spiritual competition in one sense, but it's really not a competition from the perspective of a competitive mindset, but more in the perspective of how can I also get better at my seva? How can I do more for my spiritual master? How can I do more for devotees? How can I do more the service of Srila Prabhupada and get closer to Krishna? How can I advance myself more by focusing more on Krishna consciousness? That kind of competitive spirit is actually beneficial because it helps your Krishna consciousness. So it really depends on who we are looking up to. If you don't, that's why it's very important to have the sangha, whether it's direct or whether it's people we are looking up to or hearing from, and we look at how fixed up they are in their Krishna consciousness, and that inspires us to develop Krishna consciousness more and more. And so that's how the Bhagavata devotees also look at it. And again, I'm not professing to understand the mind of the Mahabhagavata. I'm just sharing this from the perspective of as we become more experienced in our Krishna consciousness, we should not be satisfied. We should not be complacent saying, yes, I've done enough or I'm doing a lot and that's so great. We should look at people who are doing way more than us, and that should inspire us. How are they dedicating their consciousness? How are they elevating their consciousness? How are they not disturbed in the midst of so much disturbance that's constantly being thrown at us? How are they reacting in adverse circumstances and still being fixed in their Krishna consciousness? So when we look up to these ideals, these kind of great devotees, then we inspire ourselves to do more, to focus more, to intensify our sadhana. If you feel satisfied that our sadhana is really good, well, I'm chanting 16 rounds every day. I'm able to chant in one shot in the morning, so that's great. So I'm such an advanced devotee. Then that's not going to be very beneficial for your progress. You also constantly have to think that, well, I did 16 rounds today, but at least maybe 8 or 10 rounds was not so focused. So how do I get more focus? How do I get to chant every single name of the Lord? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. How do I chant every word like it may be the last word I ever speak in my lifetime? And how do I show that intensity of chanting the holy name? How do I show that gratitude that I'm getting to chant the holy name? And that kind of it's called dainyata in Sanskrit, which means essentially you're feeling completely unable to progress, and you're begging for the mercy of the spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, the Acharyas, and Krishna to progress in spiritual life. So that's one way to think about it, right? That as devotees, they want to aspire for more. So that's how they feel, even though they're from our perspective, they may be great devotees and doing a lot. They themselves look at the higher personalities who are associates of the Lord and consider themselves completely not there yet in terms of their spiritual practice. And then as a service, right, as a service, and we were speaking about this the other day as well, where Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, the spiritual master of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, he had no desire to accept any disciples. He had no desire. He had no desire to be a spiritual master and absolutely considered himself unqualified. And when Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati approached him, he said, "You're such a great scholar. I'm practically literate. How can I initiate you?" And I've also already kind of made a vow to myself that I will not have any disciples. But still, out of a sense of service, and in order to give us Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he initiated them. So devotees come from the platform of being a Mahabhagavata and absolutely have no desire. Atma Rama. And all of you know the words in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Atma Rama Shramaneo, Nirgranta Apyurukrame, Kurvanti Ahitukim Bhaktim, Ittam Bhuto Guno Hari. So even the Atma Ramas, they have no desire. But still, when they hear the pastimes of the Lord, they get attracted. So one who has no desire can get attracted. So similarly, in order to do service, in the mood of service to their spiritual master, in the mood of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, these great devotees come down from their pedestal of being Mahabhagavata and engage neophyte devotees in the service of the Lord. They explain concepts in a way that neophyte devotees can understand. Otherwise, if they only spoke at the Mahabhagavata level, then devotees, aspiring devotees like me, would have no understanding of what they're even speaking about. When Srila Prabhupada came and taught, when he first came to America, if he only spoke on the Raga platform and spoke those kind of concepts, there was absolutely no chance of anybody even understanding what he was saying. Because he was not speaking to other similarly engaged devotees who were already trying to practice Krishna consciousness in Vrindavan or Navadvip or Mayapur. He was speaking to young boys and girls, as he would call them, in New York City. So if he maintained the level of philosophy that was fully known to him, if he didn't actually step it down and speak in a way that people would understand, then there would not be a Krishna conscious movement. So great devotees and like Srila Prabhupada, eternal devotees of the Lord, they take it as a service so that they can explain it to us in a way that we can understand it. And that's how I understood it, Tharaka Prabhuji. Is that aligned with what you're thinking, Prabhuji? I don't know if it's the right answer or not.
Thank you, Prabhu. I appreciate your elaboration. There's many perspectives on this, and I'm trying to gain as comprehensive an understanding as I can. Srila Prabhupada, in his purport, describes here that he gives the example. He says a crude example is that someone has jaundice. Everything appears yellow to them. In jaundice, your whole body turns yellow, and the eyes turn yellow, and you see other things as being yellow. So this example reminds me of Srila Prabhupada would often quote Atmavan Manyate Jagat, that one sees others in terms of one's own consciousness. So, for example, a thief will tend to see everyone else as a thief because he thinks in those terms. And so a Mahabhagavat is pure in his devotional service. He is pure and undeviating. And because this is his consciousness, he therefore sees everyone else in those terms. It genuinely appears to him that everyone else is purely engaged in devotional service. Even complete non-devotees, even the demoniac, appear to him to be engaged in devotional service. Because he sees Krishna everywhere and everything all the time. It's an extraordinary thing, and equally extraordinary that such an individual would then choose to descend from that platform, having somehow the awareness that that's even an option. And it's all just extraordinary to me. But clearly, Prahlad Maharaj, he's described everywhere as Mahabhagavat, and yet he was preaching to his childhood friends, to his teachers, even to his father. So he also chose to descend for the purpose of preaching. But anyway, that was from hearing other descriptions of this from Srila Prabhupada. My understanding is that from one perspective, it is like Atmavan Manyate Jagat, that one will tend to see others in terms of one's own consciousness. But I think that there's much more to it than that. I'm still trying to understand. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you for sharing, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, you had a question or a comment?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much for an enlightening class. My question is along the same lines in terms of, it's mostly focused on the mismatch between the consciousness of the Mahabhagavat and the body. that they have, or in other words, the social expectation around the body that they have. So, for example, like Prahlad Maharaj, he's in the body of the young boy, and there's not much expectation around it. But we find that, and similarly, even the Kumaras as well, they maintain a body of a young boys, because there's not much expectation, and therefore it's much easier to actually maintain that consciousness of a Mahabhagavat. But then, if the great devotee is in an elder body, and even if, say, they've assumed the position of a spiritual master, and they still have this view that everybody's actually engaged, there's some social problems that can arise. So, for example, um, like, in South Africa, there was, during the Black Lives Matter protests, um, you know, before the Black Lives Matter protests, devotees, there would be whistleblowers saying, "Oh, there's racism in our movement," and the management wouldn't deal with it in a very strong way. And then the BLM protests started happening, and then it was like, okay, there were political agitators saying we're gonna even go for societies that are racist, and so then ISKCON South Africa then they did a whole program on just like trying to investigate these issues more, and then they came out with a public statement on how they're gonna put in more processes in place to deal with these issues. So yeah, so my question does relate to this, is that can the Mahabhagavat's perspective, especially if they occupy a position of leadership, create social problems amongst a society of devotees?
Yeah, so this is more a political question than a than a specific Shastra question, and I can have so many political perspectives, but this is not the forum for a political perspective. But from a Shastra perspective, Srila Prabhupada always, and I'll tell you what Srila Prabhupada said, right? That, and I won't quote specific examples because it'll go into a tangent, but it's like, and Srila Prabhupada's perspective was, if you are having thoughts of superiority or whatever else, or inferiority even, because of your gender or race or anything else, then he would say that you're nonsense because you're in bodily consciousness. And similarly, if someone is also discriminating based on gender or race or any other, or age or anything else, they're also similarly nonsense because they're also in bodily consciousness. And there was also instances where Srila, some of the early female disciples of Srila Prabhupada asked him that, do you actually consider women to be inferior to men? And Srila Prabhupada said, are you a woman? I thought you were a devotee. And and so Srila Prabhupada never looked at individuals from the bodily consciousness perspective at all. For him, they were all spirit soul. That's the basic teaching of the Gita. The first thing that and this is considered not even the most confidential knowledge. This is the basic knowledge. The first thing that we learn in our ABCs of Krishna consciousness is that you're not the body of the soul. That's the first thing Srila Prabhupada even taught. That's the first thing Krishna teaches. After Arjun poses all these questions in the first chapter of the Gita, the very, very first thing that Krishna teaches Arjun is that you're not the body of the soul. That's the first thing he tells him. And the concept of you're not the body of the soul, you're Atma, not Sharira, not body, is the first thing that is the fundamental knowledge of Vedic wisdom. So if we actually understand that point, then there is really no question of us having any kind of discrimination on the basis of body or gender or age or anything else. So everything that, if that is happening, then we cannot call ourselves devotees, because we don't even understand the basic concept of you're not the body of the soul, let alone I want to be Krishna conscious, I want to be, right? So when it comes to leadership positions, of course, you're dealing with a lot more social and other aspects as well, which is very different dynamic. But as an individual practitioner, if you have any thought that you are in any way superior or inferior to somebody, and you treat them accordingly based on your gender. Hey, I'm so and so gender, the other person is so and so gender, so I'm obviously superior. Or I'm so and so race, the other person is so and so race, so I'm obviously superior. Or age, or any other aspect of bodily consciousness, upadhi, then that clearly demonstrates that you are very much in bodily consciousness, which means that you have not even understood the basic concept of what Krishna consciousness, that you're not even ready to even practice anything beyond that. So that's the first thing we have to internalize. Srila Prabhupada at one time, his disciples asked him that uh, you keep emphasizing this point that you're not the body, you're the soul, you're not the body, you're the soul, and that's all we hear. Can you teach us more? And Srila Prabhupada said, well, I've said so many times you're not the body, you're the soul, and you still haven't understood that point. You're still acting on the bodily platform. So what more do you want me to teach you? So, and this was in the early days, in the early days of the movement. So the point of understanding we're not the body, we're the soul is such a fundamental point. We take it for granted because we think, hey, we know it. This is the first thing that is in the Gita as well. So as practicing devotees, we think we know it. But the question is, do we actually act that way? Do we actually act that way in every, so yeah, it may not be a racial thing, but is it related to your man and and a woman, and how you deal with matajis? Do you deal with them? How do you, so these are the things that we have to really introspect. Each of us have biases, right? That's just because of how we grew up and how we raised and so on. But then are we really aware of our biases? And is it really coming from the concept of a bodily consciousness or whatever else? And we have to be really, really aware of that. And that goes to everybody, including whether if you're in a leadership role or you're not. And each of us is in a leadership role at some level. Right? You may not be the leader of the whole movement or leader of the whole community, but you may be a leader of your household, you may be a leader of a group of people that you work with or whatever, right? So you still have to have that orientation of understanding that jiva is not black or white or Indian or Russian or anything of that sort. The spirit soul is not old or young or fat or thin or healthy or not healthy body or educated or uneducated. None of these characteristics, rural or urban, none of these characteristics are attached to the soul. And so when we actually understand that, truly understand that, then we will not have this problem. The biggest problem Srila Prabhupada emphasizes is that the problem is that we are always in bodily consciousness. And of course, the practicality exists as well, that is the practical reality we deal with. So what we have to do as a leader in the social context, those are all things that are realities that we have to deal with. But if the fundamental consciousness is not clear, then that creates a problem. And again, the question on how a society should deal with social and all that, I think it's a little beyond what I want to discuss in a Bhagavatam class. But at least from a philosophical standpoint, that's the fundamental point.
Okay. Well, we can see a similar situation arising in the fifth canto with regards to Priyavrata Maharaj, who there was an absence of leadership for the whole universe, and had he not occupied the position of Supreme Emperor, then there was going to be problems in the universe. So my issue is really a Shastric issue, is that when there's an absence of leadership and an absence of protection for devotees to actually go on practicing, because not everybody can tolerate, uh, like, okay, I as a practitioner can have a consciousness that I'm not this body, but then I'm finding it difficult to tolerate discrimination because I'm not yet a Mahabhagavat, or I'm not yet firmly situated in understanding that this is my karma. My expectation is that I'm going to be protected, all right? Because there's a devotee who's more advanced than me, who's occupying the position as a leader. That expectation is there. So we see Brahma had to force Priyavrata Maharaj to actually lead. He had to actually come down from his absorption in the Brahma Bhuta platform and actually come down and lead as a devotee. So, you know, that's really my question, is that, okay, if a devotee who is in a leadership role isn't able to do that, then do other devotees then, okay, you're a great sadhaka, you're a great devotee, you're showing the symptoms of a Mahabhagavat, but maybe another devotee can occupy this position
100%.
because there's a need for protection for the younger devotees.
100%. A
Okay.
leadership role is a Kshatriya role. A leadership role is a Kshatriya role. There is no question about that, right? And a great devotee may not always be a great leader because they're absorbed in their sadhana. A leadership position, by definition, is a Kshatriya position. And the basic quality of a Kshatriya is to protect the innocent and not tolerate injustice. That is the basic quality of a Kshatriya. So if a leader does not have the quality of being able to not protect when injustice is happening, then that's a problem that needs to be addressed, right? So again, I'm not speaking about specifics. I cannot comment on specifics, but the general concept is, and this is a Shastric point as well, that a leadership role is a Kshatriya role. And that's exactly what Krishna was telling Arjun, that you're a Kshatriya, your responsibility is to protect. So you saying that I will not protect because it's inconvenient to me, I don't want to be in the position of killing my family and I'm going to feel really bad, is not a reason to not do your duty. And that was Krishna's fundamental point, that Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha, think of me and fight. So Krishna never told Arjun that, yeah, become a devotee and then hear some beads and go to that corner and chant, and I'll take care of whatever needs to happen. Don't worry about the mess here. I'll deal with it. Because you're my devotee, I'll handle the mess on your behalf. That was never the instruction Krishna gave Arjun. Instruction was always do your duty. So if we accept positions of authority in any kind of scenario, then it's our responsibility to execute that in a Kshatriya mood. It's just the way it is. It's not my opinion. This is not my opinion. This is what Shastra says. That leadership roles are Kshatriya roles. And Kshatriyas can be as much Mahabhagavata devotees as a Shudra or a Vaishya. Krishna says in the Varnashrama, there is no such restriction that only Brahmanas can be Mahabhagavata devotees. You know, Atha Prumbhidra Shrestha, Varnashrama Vibhagasha, Svanishta Dharmasya, Samsit Haritoshnam. So all the Varnas and all the ashramas have equal opportunity to become Mahabhagavata devotees. That's what Srila Prabhupada says over and over and over again. So anyway, so on this controversial point, I will end the class.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Jai Hare Krishna.